Hi guys, my name's Melody. I'm a licensed funeral director and I've been in the funeral business for about 15 years now. In this video, I'll be going over some of the more common forms and contracts that you might be signing during an arrangement meeting at a funeral home, whether it's for someone in your life that has recently passed away or maybe you're making funeral arrangements for yourself.
The forms I'll be going over are the disclosure of Preneed, the authorization to accept or decline embalming, and the declaration for disposition of cremated or hydrolyzed human remains. And finally, I'll also be going over the degrees of kinship, which is who has the right to be making the decisions and thus signing these forms.
These are all forms that are required by the state of California for the funeral home to have you sign. The last form is specifically for cremation or alkaline hydrolysis, so if you're thinking of a different disposition method, then you won't be signing that one. Another thing to note is that you'll be signing a slew of different forms created by the funeral home. These are just some that will be required. So let's get into it.
First up is the disclosure of Preneed. This form protects you, the consumer, from purchasing at-need services unnecessarily if there has already been a Preneed arrangement made. It also helps to ensure that the decedent's wishes are carried out according to their Preneed contract, in the event that you might be unaware of the existence of such contract. Let's define some of the terms I just used. A Preneed is a contracted funeral agreement that was made prior to death, oftentimes by the person themselves. For example, I've made my own Preneed for cremation and self-signed some of these documents. At need is the contracted funeral arrangements made after death has occurred. You can think of this as at the time it's needed. Decedent is a legal term, meaning the deceased person. It implies that the deceased has certain legal rights after death. It's a common term used by funeral directors to refer to the person that has passed. Going back to the form now, the top part identifies the funeral home, who the decedent is, and the most important part, checks whether or not they have a preneed. This means that the funeral home has looked through their files or system to see if anything was under your loved one's name before meeting with you. The box under this section holds the funeral establishment accountable for presenting the preneed to you if there is one. There's a definition of what a preneed is and an explanation that it might be funded or unfunded. Sometimes the decedent doesn't finish making all of the payments towards the preneed before they pass. Even so, preneeds have the potential to ease financial burdens on families by locking in prices for funeral services at lower costs than what they would be if they were contracted for at the time of need. This larger paragraph defines the responsibility of the funeral home to present you a copy of an existing preneed and includes the legal consequences if they fail to do so. Then there's some information included about who to file a complaint with or seek additional information from if you feel the need to do so. There's an area where the survivor or responsible party and the funeral representative sign. Survivor means the person with the right to control what happens to the decedent, and responsible party is the person that's signing the at-need contract once everything has been decided. Oftentimes, survivor and responsible party are one and the same, but in the case that they're not, either one of these people can sign. Lastly, there's instructions to the funeral representative that a copy must be given to the responsible party and that it also must be kept at the funeral home for 7 years. So no need to worry if you lose this. The next form we're going over is the authorization to accept or decline embalming. This form requests approval from you for embalming or allows embalming to be declined. This protects the decedents and your right to choose this. There's typically an additional charge for embalming, and if you choose not to embalm, then your loved one will need to be refrigerated in the meantime, which there is usually also a charge for. There's 2 parts to this form, so first we'll go over the top portion. This is for when you're signing in person. So what is embalming? The form has a simplified explanation of it. Right under this top part that identifies the funeral home and the decedent, it states, embalming is the addition to or the replacement of bodily fluids by chemical preservatives or the application of chemical preservatives for the temporary preservation of the body. There could be a whole other video made or even multiple videos about the process of embalming, but it does typically include injecting these chemicals into the body, maybe topically placing chemicals on the body, and also serves the functions of not only preservation, but restoration and disinfection as well. Embalming can enhance the appearance of a decedent, control odor, it can make it feasible for the funeral home to dress or use cosmetics, and it can also buy more time for families to plan services. This form also states that embalming is not required by law. A funeral home cannot make you choose embalming, but certain types of services, such as an open casket viewing, might not be ideal or feasible without it. Underneath this is a section where the next of kin, the person with the right to make decisions, checks whether or not they authorize embalming. This section states that the decedent may be transported to another location for the purposes of storage and/or embalming. Many funeral homes don't have refrigeration or an embalming room on site. They might be using a third party for these functions, or maybe they just have or lease a separate building at a different location. This is a pretty normal thing. This section is included so you know where your loved one is physically located. This next part is a statement where you, the person signing, is representing yourself as the person that has the legal authority to make this decision. Again, I'll go over these regulations that determine who this person is towards the end of this video. Concluding the top portion of this form is a spot for your signature, relationship to the decedent, date, and location. And now we go into the bottom portion of this form, which only needs to be filled out if permission to embalm is verbally obtained. This more easily facilitates obtaining permission to embalm if you're not anywhere physically or geographically close to the funeral home. They don't have to wait to send the form over to you or have you sign it and send it back. The sooner embalming occurs, typically the better the results are. So this can oftentimes make it an easier process for the family and also makes it easier for the funeral home to get things done in a timely manner. Needless to say, you might not ever see this form, but the funeral representative still needs to explain it to you and even needs to read or provide you the portion about what embalming is and where your loved one will be kept for refrigeration and/or embalming purposes. The funeral representative then needs to fill out your name, relationship to the decedent, whether or not you choose embalming, your phone number, and the date and time they obtain the authorization from you.
Ask your funeral counselor about any questions you might have regarding embalming. They're there to help you through this process and to help you make informed decisions.
Our last form is the Declaration for Disposition of Cremated or Hydrolyzed Human Remains. This form is a statement of your instructions for what will happen to your loved ones or your cremated or hydrolyzed remains. This ensures that the disposition carried out is what the decedent themselves or the next of kin wanted. Disposition not only means the type of service you choose, such as burial, cremation, or hydrolysis, but it also refers to what will happen with the cremated or hydrolyzed remains afterwards, such as scattering at sea, being placed at a cemetery, or retained at home. When you hear the word disposition, an easy way to think of this is where that person's final resting place will be. Alkaline hydrolysis is a newer method of disposition some might not know about. It has other commonly used names including resomation, aquamation, and flameless cremation. Hydrolyzed means the reduction of a human body by way of using a highly alkaline water. Similar to cremation, the end result is the processed reduction of bones. So, the top part of this form identifies the funeral establishment, crematory being used, and decedent. Similar to an embalming room and refrigeration area, many funeral homes won't have an on-site crematory. The crematory or hydrolysis facility might be located elsewhere, or they may use a third party. Underneath this is the statement of the manner of disposition. This is completely up to you. Some examples are to be retained at a residence, to be scattered at sea. Cremated remains can also be split into separate portions. The options are endless. The form then asks for a list of people with the right to control disposition along with their signatures. There may be more than one person with this right. Underneath that is a list of the people that are contracting for the services along with their signatures. The person contracting is the person that is signing the final at-need contract. The funeral representative needs to sign this form as well. The state of California also requires this form to have a paragraph regarding the responsibility of the funeral establishment to have this form signed and what the consequences are if it isn't. Lastly, There's a note regarding cremated and hydrolyzed remains stating that if not all of it fits into the urn, then the funeral home must provide a larger container at no additional cost, or they can place the excess into a second container and attach it to the first. Now that we've covered all of the forms, let's talk about the degrees of kinship. So, who has the legal right to decide what happens? The phrasing you're likely to hear is who is the person with the right to control disposition. In more simplified terms, California determines this in the following order. First is the agent under a power of attorney for healthcare who has the right and duty of disposition. This could be anyone, really. It could be the decedent's neighbor, or it could be the decedent's best friend, as long as they're listed and appointed as the primary agent. The funeral home is likely to ask for a copy of the power of attorney, and a representative should be able to clarify with you whether or not it includes this right if you're unsure. Second is the spouse. Third are children 18 and up. If there's multiple children, then the majority of those kids will have the right. After children, it's parents, then siblings, then grandparents, etc., etc. It goes on and on.
It can sometimes be tricky determining who exactly is the legal next of kin, but that is a video for another time. I know from experience that retaining all of this information can be really difficult during times of grief, and I hope that this video has helped in some way. So thanks for watching, and please take care of yourself.